Welcome back. If you're just joining us, you are now watching part 2 of tonight's 3-part show. We've just finished part 1 where we both did a tasting of 1792 Small Batch Bourbon. Ken, are you enjoying the 1792 Small Batch Bourbon in moderation tonight?
In moderation. I mean, I'm going to top off my glass for this one, but I'm going to take it real slow. So I'm good. How about you?
Glad to hear it.
How are you doing with it?
I like it. I don't tend to do a lot of ryes, but I find this to be quite good.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we jump into tonight's episode of Sons, I first want to remind everyone, please like and subscribe. Please click that little bell at the top of your page so you don't miss any future shows. And do be sure to leave us your questions and comments in the comment section below. Or you can also email your questions to us at ask@bourbonbros, that's BROS.TV. And if your question doesn't suck, we may even answer it on a future show. Okay, let's get into tonight's discussion of Sons of Anarchy, Season 1, Episode 4, titled Patchover.
Yes, Patchover.
This is a good one.
Mm-hmm. I'd agree.
So, similar to the way that I did in part 1 with the bourbon, let me just give you the quick download of the facts. So, original air date, September 24, 2008.
Wow, 12 years already.
We're almost out of September. We'll soon be in October. This was written by James D. Perriott. So we are now at the first episode that is not written by Kurt Sutter.
Good point. Good catch.
Now, I looked up the writer, and Ken, you should get a kick out of this. James Perriott has been around for a little while. He's written a lot of stuff. But when I looked at his writing credits, there was one in particular that jumped out to me. And I'm going to take you back all the way to 1975.
It's going back.
He wrote some episodes of The $6 Million Man.
Wow. That's so old. I don't really remember it. Do you?
Oh, you don't remember Lee Majors?
Yeah.
The
I know it was Lee
Bionic?
Majors, but I don't really remember many of those episodes. But
I don't remember the episodes at all. I just know that I loved that show. I had the action figure. I was all about it. Huge fan.
He wrote that.
I guess that makes me
a
fan. What's that?
He wrote that, or parts of it?
He wrote some episodes.
Yeah. Okay. So wow. He's been around.
And it was fairly early in his biography, so I would assume it was fairly early in his writing career. And he's been writing pretty consistently, but I guess that means I've been a fan of his since 1975. I didn't even know it.
Wow.
All right, let's get into the synopsis. Again, I modified this, pared it down, didn't want to quite give you the entire episode, but we'll kind of just cover it in 4 basic points. Point number 1, with the Mayans posing a larger threat, Clay decides to patch over a brother club in Indian Hills, Nevada. Half-Sack puts his foot in his mouth with Clay and later pays the price. Jax decides to stir shit up with the Mayans, and Agent Joshua Cohn begins investigating Sam Crow and begins showing his display of creepiness.
Definitely creepy, Agent Cohn.
So what were your overall impressions of the episode, Ken?
No, I thought it was very entertaining, very well done, well put together. I was entertained the whole time. You touched on that Clay decides to patch over a brother club in Indian Hills, the Devil's Tribe. I had a question for you on that. Why did he think he could just do that? What power did he exhibit or think he had to where he could just make that happen?
So there are motorcycle clubs, and there are outlaw motorcycle clubs, and then there are clubs of different sizes. And so a lot of times you'll have kind of, if you think about it as like a tier 2 and tier 1, right? So You'll have smaller tier 2 clubs that are essentially support clubs for the larger tier 1 club. So if you put it in terms of this episode, Sam Crow is the tier 1 club, and the Devil's Tribe is more of a support club.
So they were already, to a degree, associated or affiliated with them.
Correct. And so ultimately what you see in the episode, and we'll talk more about this, is Clay kind of doesn't really give them a choice, right? And the reality is that the Devil's Tribe has to vote and approve the patch over. And although in this episode it's portrayed more like a hostile takeover, the reality is that most of the time when you have a tier 1 club that wants to bring you in, it is by invitation, and it is generally something that you're honored to be asked to patch over, because it's like being promoted from tier 2 to tier 1. So most of the time it's looked at as something that clubs want versus not want, like in this episode. But as far as why Clay was able to kind of walk in and say, like, this is happening, even though it had to result in a vote, is because just as the Devil's Tribe is supporting Sam Crow, they also get Sam Crow's protection, in this case from the Mayans.
Okay.
If they were not to vote in approval of that patch over, they would lose that protection. And now they would not have the ability to stand up to the Mayans, and they'd likely be taken over. So it's like, if you want our protection, you're going to approve this patch over.
Okay. That makes sense.
So it was a strong arm move by Clay, but he also knew that they really didn't have a choice.
Okay. So aside from that, what was your opinion of the episode?
I liked it. I think part of it was coming off of Funtown, which is such a difficult subject matter, and moving to this, which is a little more fun. And you had a lot of action. You had a lot of comedic moments. You had some dramatic moments, but not in the same way as Funtown. So I think from that standpoint, it was almost kind of a nice reprieve from what we had in Funtown. And there were really some great moments, and it was a fun episode.
Yeah.
And we also had a couple of new characters introduced, right?
Yeah, we did. As I recall, this was our first exposure to Jerry White, right?
Right. He's the president of the Devil's Tribe.
He's the president of Devil's Tribe. He served in Nam with John Teller, Jax's dad.
Jax's dad.
And we were also introduced to Cherry.
Yes.
Cherry there, who's kind of associated with the club, the Devil's Tribe. She wouldn't be considered to be anyone's quote-unquote old lady yet, but she's hoping to.
Yes.
And, so we're introduced to her in this episode.
That's right. And don't want to reveal too much, but basically you have Cherry's character in what would appear to be a standalone episode, but we do see Cherry again.
Yes, we do.
Which is why we're choosing to reference her as a new character, where there are some other individuals in this episode that we don't see again, and so we're not going to take the time to reference them as a new character. All right, so let's talk a little bit about some of the storylines. Now, there's actually a lot going on in this episode. We jump around a fair amount between different storylines, and so as I started to jot down all the storylines, the list actually became quite long. So what I did is there are some storylines that were kind of what I would call the story of the week, that were really just about this one episode. And then there's that continuation of ongoing storylines that are more, part of the season or potentially multiple seasons. So I decided to break it up that way. So I'll just give you a quick rundown, and then we can kind of jump in and talk about some of these. But For the episode, kind of the main storyline, it's in the title of the episode, right? Patching over the Devil's Tribe. And then you also have as kind of a episode storyline, this beef that gets kind of accidentally created between Clay and Half Sack, right? Mm-hmm. Half Sack kind of puts his foot in his mouth. Mm-hmm. And then you have Cherry and her desire to become an old lady. And then you have this new girl that Jax picks up at a gas station, and Cherry's kind of showing her the ropes. Mm-hmm. And that kind of gets woven throughout the episode as well. And then as far as kind of the ongoing storylines, we have relocating the guns, which is still something that the club is trying to deal with. You've got Agent Cone, who we're starting to get a sense of who he is and what he's about. Mm-hmm. We still have this kind of standoff between Gemma and Tara, and that continues. And then we have, I think, what we basically had since the pilot, which is Sam Crow and the Mayans and their beef with one another.
Right.
Would you agree that those are kind of the major storylines? Anything I missed?
No, I think that covers it pretty well. I think it's beneficial to separate what carries over and what's ongoing versus what was really relevant to this particular episode. So, I agree.
So should we kick things off with Half Sack's faux pas?
Sure. So they're staying there at Teller Motors. Jax is working on a motorcycle. Gemma pulls in her, I don't know, what is that, a Cadillac? It's a nice little coupe.
Yeah, so it's a Cadillac that's basically based on the Corvette.
Okay, yeah, it looked nice. And anyway, it happened so quickly, but Half Sack is checking out Gemma when she gets out of the car, and that's when he turns to Tig and says that...
See, I gotta admit, Clay's old lady gives me a serious milk chubby.
Yes, and this is all part of the opening scene, right? Mm-hmm. So This is before the first credits roll. And I love how just Clay hears it. Tig and Half Sack realize that Clay's there. Clay just turns around and walks away. Doesn't say a word. Mm-hmm. You don't know whether he's mad, flattered, indifferent, until later. It was very well done. As we mentioned, he tells Tig, what prospect? And now you know there's an issue there. Yeah, that's a great scene. I also liked in that initial opening sequence, which, by the way, went almost 9 minutes. That whole opening scene went almost 9 minutes before the opening credits. A lot happened in those 9 minutes. I did note
it was long. It was long.
But the scene kind of right before we went to commercial was when Jax and Bobby were headed to Nevada. Mm-hmm. And remember, Jax has kind of promised Clay they're going to lay low, right? They're going to, get there without stirring any issues up with the Mayans. And of course, what happens right off the bat? They encounter the Mayans at roughly the Nevada border or before the Nevada border. And what I loved about this scene is it immediately reminded me of Top Gun, the movie Top Gun. Do you remember when
I see where
Tom Cruise playing Maverick, right? Is like, I'm going to hit the brakes and they're going to fly right by, right? And he hits the brakes and the jet stops almost in midair as the other one passes by, and then he drops down behind the MiG and gets missile lock. That's basically what Jax and Bobby did.
Right. Because the Mayans flipped around and as they passed by them, because they were headed towards each other, the Mayans turned around and caught up to them, and there was some tension there.
Yes. And Jax basically looks at Bobby and says, like, 2 on 3, right? Because there's 3 Mayans and 2 of them, as if to say, like, I'm good with being outnumbered 2 to 3. Are you good? And Bobby just kind of like, yeah, I'm good.
I'm good.
And then without any words spoken, they immediately hit their brakes at the same time, right? Which was interesting, right? Like normally it'd be like, now, right? But they obviously have done this enough times, apparently, where we are to believe that they just knew exactly when to hit the brakes on an open road. Fade to black, roll the credits.
Yeah. off the
But it was a
commercial.
fun scene.
Yeah, it was good.
What's next on your list?
Towards the beginning of the show, after they come back, if you remember how the last episode ended, Agent Cohn has arrived in Charming.
Yep.
And he is catching up with Hale. Hale is kind of giving him the skinny on what is happening in the town.
Right, because Hale loves that there's somebody else that's wanting to take Sam Crow down.
He's teaming up with him, and he brings him up to speed. He as you may recall, he's shutting the office door, and he's letting him know that some of the corruption, without saying it, is happening right here within this department.
Sam Crow isn't stonewalling growth by themselves. They get a lot of help. Some of it from inside this department.
That's right.
So that's taking place. There is it might have been a next scene when they flash back to the station, but Hale walks in extremely upset because he had found out.
You mean Unser? Unser walks in.
Sorry, Unser walked in, and he finds out that Agent Cohn's there, ATF there in the house. He didn't know about it. He's extremely
Hale never
upset.
told him.
Yeah, he's extremely upset.
You're the chief. That's right. I'm the goddamn chief.
Yeah. It was a nice scene because you immediately in that scene that Hale knows Unser is on the take with the club, and so he purposely left him out, right? So without having to kind of explain all of that, you immediately pick that up, and you get to see Unser starting to lay down the law. And again, we know from the previous episode that Clay's basically forcing him to
stick around,
not only not retire, right, stick around, but also Clay's forcing him to keep Hale off his back. And so you can see almost that sense of urgency with Unser of like he needs this whole thing to go away or it's going to be problematic for him. Yeah, great choice. That was a good little scene. You had mentioned about the storyline around Tara and the handgun,
right?
And I actually wanted to go back to that scene where Gemma and Tara are in the car after Gemma gave her a ride home. And you've got Gemma kind of trying to politely pump Tara for information about the gun.
Now,
right?
It may be worth mentioning why the gun is in the purse to begin with. So,
yes.
So Agent Cohn, he continues to do creepy things in this series. He
and we haven't gotten to a lot of the creepiness yet.
No, we haven't even touched upon it. But in this episode, I think I recall 3, creepy, quote unquote, creepy moments. And the first one where he shows up at her house, he leaves rose petals on Tara's car, her windshield. She knows immediately, she connects the dots, knows it's him and he must be in town. That's when she goes and digs out her pistol and throws it in her purse.
That's right, because beforehand he had called her, but the assumption is he's in Chicago.
Yeah, she doesn't know.
And the rose petals in the car and the way that she reacted gives me the impression that he's done that before when things were in a better place. And so she's immediately able to connect who that is. Right. She doesn't mistake it for Jax or anyone else. She knows. Yeah. So that was when Tara ran in, grabs the gun, right? She takes the car to Teller Motors and is hoping that Jax will be the one to give her a ride home and finds herself getting a ride from Gemma instead. Because Jax, to this point, still has no idea that there's this riff or this beef between Gemma and Tara.
Yeah, he doesn't know yet.
And as you said, Gemma rifled through Tara's purse, found the gun, and then when she gets home in the driveway, she brings the gun up. And Tara tries to kind of blow it off as I lived in a rough neighborhood when I was in Chicago, so I had this for protection, and I forgot it was in my purse.
Right.
And do you remember what Gemma's response was?
Yeah, I do. She said something to the effect of,
Beretta's not an old tampon. You don't just forget it's in your bag.
just the way she says it. I didn't do that justice, but,
It was a great line.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, great writing, great delivery by Katie Seagal, who played Gemma, and it really emphasizes the point of like, you don't just forget that you have a gun, that you're carrying around a gun, especially when you work in a hospital.
Mm-hmm. Right. You don't forget about that.
Yeah. So that line just immediately struck out for me, which is why I chose it. What else do you have? Got time for one more.
All right. Well, I don't recall exactly where they were where they were at, but Bobby and Jax, maybe they were on their way out to Indian Hills. They got to the area. I don't think they were actually at the Devil's Tribe Club, or were they? But it's when they come out and they see.
You're not going.
You see where Susie, and her boyfriend
Are you going
sitting
say
on
cheese?
Jax's bike. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Say cheese. Yeah. It was at a gas station on the way to Nevada.
That's right. It's at a gas station, so it wasn't at the Devil's Tribe Club. So they come out and find this guy taking pictures of Susie on Jack's bike. And
actually, Susie taking pictures of him sitting on Jax's bike.
Yeah, I'm screwing this up. But you know where I'm going. It's where Bobby...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Bobby's the say cheese moment.
So if I remember correctly, Jax plays it off like it's no big deal, right? Susie's like, I told him not to sit on your bike. And Jack's like, oh, it's fine. And then he's like, here, let me take the photo, right? So Jax takes the photo and then hands the camera to Bobby.
Cheese. Nice.
That's before.
Before. Don't ever sit on another man's bike, asshole.
That's after.
It was just well played. And then he ends up with the girl.
I love that. Yeah, Jackson takes the guy's girlfriend to boot. Fantastic. What a great scene.
Yep, little humor there.
But also at the same time, like, what a moron to go sit on some guy's Harley that you don't know.
Yeah, you don't do that.
Like, where's common decency in this world today? All right. That's going to do it for part 2. I want to remind everyone, please like and subscribe. Please check out our channel for more episodes. And be sure to join us for part 3, where we're going to continue to enjoy some 1792 small batch bourbon in moderation. Ken,
carefully
talking to you here. And we'll continue our discussion of Sons of Anarchy, Season 1, Episode 4, titled Patchover. Stay with us.